One second.
We have with us
Give me a second.
Dr. Muralidhar, who will be talking on managing paralytic strabismus. So he is presently consultant pediatric glaucoma and neuro-ophthalmology at the Eye Foundation, RS Puram, and he has done his residency and senior residency at RP Center and Murun's Eye Center, Salt Lake City. He is one of the most popular surgeons, extremely friendly, extremely nice, with huge interest in pediatric ophthalmology and neuro-ophthalmology, and has real outstanding state-of-the-art knowledge, skills, and he has conducted innumerable instructional courses, has multiple publications, and one of the finest fellows in our specialty. So, Dr. Murli, please.
Sir, thank you very much for the kind introduction, sir. And I was your student as well. So I'll be talking on management of paralytic strabismus. So we'll start with lateral rectus palsy first. So when managing lateral rectus palsy, we need to have this checklist in hand. Have neurological causes been attended? Are the systemic risk factors in check? And a complete orthoptic and motility exam. We wait for 6 to 8 months for a natural resolution if and when present. We do not operate before 6 months. And in the meantime, we can use prisms, we can use monocular occlusion, we can use botulinum toxin as well in the meantime. So this is an example. This is an adult patient around 28 years old. He presented with right sixth nerve palsy after a viral illness. The MRI brain with contrast was normal. There were no other neurological signs. The fundus examination was normal as well. And his only complaint was binocular diplopia. So he presented with history of viral illness a couple of weeks back. And now he presented with history of diplopia. So having just one minute. I'll get this video going. There is an abduction restriction. And you can see that the right abducting saccades are floating. They are floating saccades. So this is very important. The observation of saccades is very important, more so in kids, because in kids, forced duction and forced generation test is very difficult. So we gave him a course of oral steroids and he has had complete resolution. So this is for the medical causes of sixth nerve palsy. So on cover test, you note that he's fully orthophoric. In primary position, the abduction has recovered as well. So now coming to another very important thing, that is the role of botulinum toxin. I give botulinum toxin after waiting for 3 to 4 weeks of non-resolution, especially in the atherosclerotic age group. I have used it almost exclusively for sixth nerve palsy. Only one patient with fourth nerve palsy I've used it. I give it after non-resolution for 3 to 4 weeks, and after an MRI with contrast is declared normal. So I've used it in one patient with fourth nerve palsy as well. This is my technique. I grab the medial rectus with a rectus forceps and go a few millimeter behind with a 30 gauge needle and inject between 2.5 to 7.5 units of botulinum toxin. The amount of toxin injected depends on the primary position deviation and how much of juice is left in the lateral rectus, depending on evaluation of the saccades, depending on the motility restriction, and on the force duction and force generation testing. So now, if the lateral rectus is not working, if the recovery is not there for 6 to 9 months and Botox has not been used or has not succeeded, then we need to know in planning for surgery whether the globe is crossing the midline or not. We need to do a force duction testing and a force generation testing to see how much of juice is left in the lateral rectus. And if the medial rectus is tight or not, we need to have an evaluation of the saccade. And if yes, the lateral rectus is working, we can do a resect or a recess plicate. We can add Botox. And if the lateral rectus doesn't have any juice left in it, then we can do a transposition procedure or inject botulinum toxin. So this is an example. This patient had medulloblastoma, was suspected von Hippel-Lindau disease. These are her measurements. These are her 3x3 table cardinal gaze measurements. And this patient had non-resolution for almost 6 months. She's had neurosurgery done. The neurosurgeon said everything is fine and the fundus examination is also fine. So this lateral rectus is definitely working because you see that the globe is crossing the midline. The force generation test also showed a very good tug. So we did a recess resect procedure and we were able to align the patient in all the cardinal gazes. So sixth nerve palsy treatment is very gratifying if the lateral rectus has got adequate juice left in it. Now, if the lateral rectus is not working, there's no point in a recess resect procedure. So we have to look at some other procedure. This video is not playing. I'll try to play the video at the end if time permits. So this is how a forced adduction and forced generation testing is done. See the abduction restriction here. So you grab the globe at the limbus, elevate the globe, not retropulse it. And a forced generation testing, you try to pull the globe in the opposite direction to see if the lateral rectus is having any tug or not. So for a weak lateral rectus, we can do transposition procedure. There are innumerable procedures available, including the recently propounded Nishida's procedure. So these are various procedures. This is a Jensen's procedure. My preference is, if the forced adduction test is negative, I would go for a Hammersham's procedure. If the forced adduction test is positive, I recess the medial rectus and transpose one of the vertical recti. So this is again a Hammersham's procedure. I hope the video plays. If not, I can always play it from outside at the end. So in Hammersham's procedure, we basically split the vertical recti. I'll try to play it from behind. So this is an adjustable transposition, adjustable Hammersham's. So this is not a sixth nerve palsy. This is advanced retraction syndrome in which the lateral rectus has been deactivated. So we can also do a adjustable Hammersham's procedure. So this is a left sixth nerve palsy before and after Hammersham's procedure with Botox to the left medial rectus. Please note that this deviation is huge. I'm sorry. Please note that this deviation is huge, and just a transposition procedure alone will not suffice. So we did a transposition double augmentation. That is, we did a Brooks modification of 3 mm of resection on the vertical recti, and we also used the Foster's augmentation suture. And we did not recess the medial rectus. We gave Botox to the medial rectus. So this patient has been satisfactorily aligned and is now diplopia free in right gaze and primary position. So now we go to third nerve palsy. Third nerve palsy, again the same principles apply, whether the medial rectus has got any juice left in it or not, and that we assess based on whether the globe is crossing the midline, based on the Saccards, and based on the results of FDT and FGT. Please remember to rule out ocular myasthenia gravis, because if you miss myasthenia gravis, the results would be disastrous. And in case the medial rectus has got some juice left in it, this was a patient with a clipped PCOM aneurysm. So the interventional radiologist said that the aneurysm is fully thrombosed and there's no more risk. And note that the globe is just crossing the midline, FGT, we felt a weak tug. And so we did a large recession of the lateral rectus together with MR resection, and we were able to align him in primary position without any double vision. We also did a, please note that this patient has aberrant region.
1 minute left.
Yes, so the recess resect procedure was done on the right eye, not on the left eye. So this is another patient with a complete third nerve palsy. So this is after precaruncular fixation. In case the medial rectus doesn't have any juice left in it, you have two options. One is a precaruncular fixation. I have done the LR to MR transposition also, but I mean, I will not talk about it. So my preference is for either the this thing or SR or LR deactivation. That is, you suture the LR lateral. This is the pre-op. The bottom one is the pre-op photo. This is the post-op photograph. We suture the LR to the lateral wall periosteum, and we plicate the medial rectus. We can also do a SO nasal tenotomy. So partial third nerve palsy, if in this patient, the left elevation is restricted, so we plicated the superior rectus, and this was the pre-op deviations, and you can see the alignment in the post-operative period. The elevation also has improved. This is a patient with an inferior rectus paresis. So this was after a Bulgur injury and after inferior rectus retrieval. And this is a flap tear. So we just excised. I'll just wrap up with the third nerve palsy, not to leave it in between. So this patient had a horizontal and a vertical deviation, a partial third nerve palsy. So for horizontal deviation, we operated on the other eye, and for the small vertical rectus, we did a mini plication. So we were again able to align the patient. And a predominant MR palsy where the MR didn't have any juice left in it, we transposed the superior and the inferior rectus, half tendon transfer with Foster's modification suture, and we're again able to align. So I'll wrap up with this. And
Dr. Rohit.
Thank you, Murli. Wonderful. presentation. I was just wondering, how do you put Botox for a superior oblique palsy? So where exactly did you put it for the inferior oblique botulinum toxin?
Yeah, sir, this was a patient with superior oblique palsy. This was a 68-year-old with superior oblique palsy, and he had a very small deviation around 12 prisms, 12 prism R by L, right superior oblique palsy. So what I did was I hooked the inferior oblique. I gave him a little bit of sedation. I hooked the inferior oblique and injected into the belly of the inferior oblique. I didn't measure the distance from the insertion, but it was roughly halfway between the LR and the IR. But that was just one case. The patient was.
So you opened and
opened
under direct visibility. Great. And a question: how long do you wait after a palsy has developed, which is possibly medical in origin, if you feel, and how long would you wait before you plan your surgical intervention?
For surgical intervention, depends on the etiology. I usually wait for 6 to 9 months of non-resolution. But if I see a patient whom I have seen at 1 month and at let's say 5 to 6 months he's had an improvement in deviation, then I would extend my waiting period by let's say another 3 to 4 months. I wait for at least 2 stable deviations separated by a couple of months and a minimum of 6 to 9 months of contact.
How often have you seen spontaneous recoveries after your paralytic strabismus caused by closed head injury?
In paralytic strabismus, I mean, a lot of studies have been there. It is roughly 50-50. The most unfortunate thing is having a third nerve traumatic palsy, because these third nerve palsies, they recover partially. Initially, the ptosis is complete and the patient doesn't report diplopia. But later on, the ptosis gets recovered, but the primary position deviation is not very great. So the patient starts reporting diplopia. So roughly, I would say in third nerve palsies, after a severe head injury, especially when the patient has undergone something like a neurosurgical evacuation of a clot, complete recovery is very, very rare in third nerve palsies. Sixth nerve palsies generally recover. I would give a conservative percentage of 50%, and the same for fourth nerve palsies as well. Complete third nerve palsies, especially those that are pupil involving and especially those associated with severe head injuries, they rarely recover completely. They usually recover partially. Sometimes they develop an aberrant regeneration, the ptosis goes away and the patient starts reporting diplopia.
So thanks a lot, Murli. That was a wonderful talk.